KRQE News Special, the best of Larry Barker 2024.
Hello and welcome to this KRQE News 13 special, the best of Larry Barker Investigates. Over the next hour, we will look at some of the most impactful investigations Larry did in 2024. In January, Larry highlighted a report card that gave the University of New Mexico Hospital a score of F, the worst possible healthcare rating.
That had to have been a surprise and a shock to you.
It was not only shocking, it's really disappointing.
Meet Kate Becker, the CEO for the University of New Mexico Hospital. According to a just-released review of hospital patient safety, UNMH received a failing grade. That's the finding of the Leapfrog Group, a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit that promotes safety and transparency in healthcare. The Leapfrog Group analyzes publicly reported medical data to rate how well hospitals keep patients safe from errors, injuries, and infections. Twice a year, the Leapfrog Group issues report cards on the quality of care at some 2,800 hospitals across the U.S.
The hospital safety grade is a composite measure that specifically looked at preventable harm, so things like accidents, errors, infections, basically mistakes that can happen to you when you're in the hospital, that the best evidence tells us are entirely preventable.
The Leapfrog Group's Missy Danforth provided an overview of UNM's hospital rating.
The University of New Mexico Hospital performed worse than average on most of the 22 measures included in the hospital safety grade. They were assigned an overall numerical score based on that performance, which corresponds to an F grade.
If you could put the safety grade for the University of New Mexico Hospital in perspective with the other hospitals nationwide that were graded.
Only 11 hospitals this fall received an F grade, so they are among the lower performing hospitals in the country right now.
Is that a big deal?
It's a big deal if you're a patient or the family member of a patient in that hospital.
To you, as the hospital's CEO, what does that F grade mean to you?
To me, as the hospital's CEO, the F grade means that we need to do better. I know we provide high quality care here. I'm a patient here myself, and I know that that's not how the people here feel about the work that we do. And so it's really, more than anything else, it's a call to action to figure out how we do better.
According to the survey findings, when it comes to dangerous complications following surgery, medical procedures, or childbirth, UNMH scored below average.
In this case, the University of New Mexico performed worse than the average hospital in the country. That means that they had higher incidences of these medical and surgical complications than other hospitals in the country.
This category includes UNMH patients who experience dangerous bed sores, patient falls and injuries, falls causing broken hips, and dangerous blood clots, which can lead to chest pain, unconsciousness, even death. Another component of the university hospital's failing grade is the hospital's below average health care associated with infections. Certain kinds of bacteria acquired in the hospital can increase a patient's length of stay and can be very dangerous. Surgical site infections following colon surgery was also found to be higher at UNMH compared to other hospitals nationwide.
Is there anything in the fall 2023 University of New Mexico Hospital safety grade that you would say, from your perspective, would be, quote, troubling?
Everything included in the hospital safety grade is there because it represents a serious risk to patients' physical well-being and, frankly, emotional well-being.
So when you receive a report like this, what is your level of concern?
My level of concern is very high because we know how much trust the community places in us, and we want them to feel confident in the care they are receiving here, and that's really important to us.
The hospital's CEO does not dispute the Leapfrog findings per se. However, She points out some of the data was compiled during COVID and is several years old. She says a number of deficiencies have already been addressed. She also notes, as New Mexico's only Level 1 trauma center, UNMH deals with a patient population that has more acute illnesses.
This hospital runs at 130% of its capacity every day. Every day we have between 60 and 80 admitted patients sitting in our emergency room, waiting to go upstairs. We're providing care in the waiting room of the emergency room because there are so many people who need care. And they need the kind of care we can give. No one's going to say that's a great patient experience. There are things that this score reflects that we know are not ideal. But we also know we can't turn anybody away.
What's the takeaway from the University of New Mexico Hospital Fall 2023 safety grade?
That there's a lot of opportunity to improve. The safety grade doesn't just represent a series of numbers. It really captures bad things that happen to patients and their families. We want to make sure that hospitals are laser focused on making improvements to patient safety and quality.
Next year, when the next report comes out, you think it'll be a better report?
I know it'll be a better report. No one should pretend they can see the future. No one saw COVID coming. But I would say that a year from now, we should be a C, which is not ideal either, but it definitely is the average, and that is where we should be.
Was this report a wake-up call for UNMH?
From a morale of our providers and staff, I don't know that I would say it was a wake-up call. Instead, I would say, I'm really sorry that we failed to make sure that we could fill out that survey in a way that didn't leave them with this impression.
Larry Barker, KRQE, News 13.
According to the Leapfrog Group's just released Fall 2024 survey, the University of New Mexico Hospital showed some improvement in its safety practices, moving from an F to a D. According to a Larry Barker investigation in July, communities across New Mexico are plagued with aging, broken, and useless fire hydrants. It's a public safety crisis impacting thousands. There's a new development. Here's Larry's follow-up investigation.
Today, what's the value of this fire hydrant to the town of Carrizozo?
Zero. It's not valuable at all.
When was the last time you saw that fire hydrant working?
I never have.
You think it even works?
I doubt it.
If this building right here caught on fire, could you depend on this fire hydrant?
Absolutely not.
There's something terribly amiss in the picturesque Lincoln County town of Carrizozo. Now, the casual visitor probably would not notice, but if you live in this small southern New Mexico community, you know all about it. Bob Hempel is Carrizozo's mayor.
It's a big deal because we need to protect the citizens.
To understand what's happened here, look no further than 504 D Avenue. Carrizozo Fire Chief Leroy Zamora remembers February 21st and the devastating blaze that destroyed everything.
We had to stretch over 1,200 feet of hose from the hydrants because there was none close enough.
You see, when it comes to fire, the first line of defense for any community are fire hydrants. 2 years ago, we toured Carrizozo's fire protection system. For example, 106 Birch Avenue.
Today, does this hydrant work?
No, sir.
How long has this thing been out of service?
It has been out of service now for about 5 years at least.
11th and E.
But if there's a fire, you're not going to be able to use this one.
No.
207 Cedar.
Does this hydrant work?
No, sir.
How long has it been out of service?
10 years at least.
This 70-year-old rusted relic at 10th and E has not worked in decades. And at 5th and D, no one knows just how long this device has been dead. It's the same story all over Carrizozo: broken, useless fire protection.
I can't think of any public property that would be any more important than the functioning fire hydrant.
In 2022, we met with then Mayor Ray Dean.
We're fortunate in not having fires very often, but we know it's only a matter of time. The school, for instance, right? That would be a huge, huge tragedy. And I can probably take you to a fire hydrant next to school that's not functioning at all.
So why doesn't the town just fix its inoperative fire hydrants? Well, like a lot of small rural communities, Carrizozo struggles to provide basic services for its 1,400 residents. The town's only bank is gone. So is the newspaper, the movie theater, and the pharmacy. The last grocery store shut down years ago. So with a dwindling tax base, there simply is no money in the town coffers to address broken fire hydrants. So Carrizozo made repeated appeals to the state legislature for help.
You made a capital outlay request to replace the town's fire hydrants, $350,000.
Yes, sir.
Was that funded by the legislature?
It was not funded.
In 2022, state lawmakers rejected Carrizozo's $350,000 public safety request. Instead, they appropriated $1.5 million to upgrade New Mexico golf courses. Go figure. And it's not just Carrizozo. From Belen to Columbus, small rural communities face the same public safety crisis. No money to fix an aging network of broken fire hydrants. Our expose aired in 2022. In 2023, someone in Santa Fe must have been paying attention. During the legislative session, lawmakers finally took notice and appropriated $400,000 for Carrizozo fire hydrant replacement. His Honor, Bob Hemphill, is the town's newly elected mayor.
This one is stamped on it. It's in 1954, and to replace that is going to be close to $17,000. There's no way that the town could come up with the amount of money to replace these.
So what are you going to do with that $400,000?
We're going to replace the out-of-service and faulty fire hydrants within our community.
Troy Hurd is Carrizozo's public works superintendent.
It's been a long time coming to address this, but it's happening.
Last month, almost 36 brand new fire hydrants were delivered to the town. And today, crews are hard at work digging up rotted water lines and 70-year-old inoperative fire protection relics.
A week ago, there was a 1954 model fire hydrant that was installed in 54 with the valve and has been inoperable or faulty for several years. They've completely replaced everything. These are the newest thing on the market.
If we come back in 6 months, is this dead fire hydrant going to be here at this corner of 11th and E?
No, sir. This fire hydrant will be brand new.
Larry Barker, KRQE, News 13.
It's a rich part of history, a museum with important artifacts. Larry discovered this museum seems to be missing one thing: visitors. This KRQE News 13 special has plenty more when we come back. In March, Larry took us inside a secret museum with a vast collection of historic relics. But don't plan on visiting. Even though state lawmakers earmarked hundreds of thousands of dollars, the museum's collection is strictly off limits.
You ever experienced anything like this before?
Never. You know, in all my years with in state government, federal government, and local government, Never. This is the first time.
It's an antiquated building hidden away in Albuquerque's Northwest Warehouse District. These World War II era corrugated steel Quonset huts house a museum the likes of which you have never seen. Welcome to the New Mexico Museum of Military History. Never heard of it? Well, that's because the privately owned museum collection is closed to the public. In fact, despite financial support from Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, the National Guard, and the state legislature, the Stealth Museum has no phone, no signs, no visiting hours, it's not listed in tourist brochures, and the door is always locked. Now, you would expect a military museum to look something like this, but this museum is different. Take a peek inside, and the first thing to hit you will be clutter and disarray. You see, this collection is less a museum and more a vast hodgepodge of military memorabilia, including trucks, jeeps, trailers, ambulances, motorcycles, parts, uniforms, hats, ribbons, ammo boxes, and miscellaneous papers. The core of the museum's collection are scores of vehicles that once saw service in far-flung places across the globe. Some are in working condition, some not. The assemblage is owned by a nonprofit group called the New Mexico Museum of Military History.
The World War II generation is all but gone.
Greg Hart serves on the museum board.
This is what they took and fought a war with. And we'd like to preserve it here in New Mexico for future generations.
Faced with the challenge of owning military equipment with no place to display it, the museum sought public funding for a building to showcase its collection. State lawmakers chipped in $830,000, and the city of Rio Rancho offered to donate 5 acres of land for a museum complex. But those commitments turned into just another expensive government boondoggle. You see, the New Mexico Military History Museum was a project that could have been, but never was. In 2006, the legislature appropriated $100,000 for architects to design a 76,000 square foot museum complete with exhibit halls, storage areas, and a gift shop. However, after the organization failed to come up with $8 million to cover construction costs, the architectural plans were discarded. In fact, the Military History Museum has lost more than $700,000 in state appropriations because the nonprofit group could not meet New Mexico funding deadlines. Meanwhile, the National Guard helped out by allowing the museum to temporarily store vehicles at the Rio Rancho Armory. However, the nonprofit wore out its welcome after temporary storage stretched into almost 20 years. Because it had breached its agreement, the museum was directed to remove all its equipment from the armory. Many of the historic vehicles have since lost their value after being stored for years unprotected from the elements. In 2006, the city of Albuquerque agreed to store the private collection in these twin warehouses. In exchange for rent-free use of city property, the museum agreed to display memorabilia in parades and other events for the benefit of the public.
When the city leases its property to be used by a private entity, what is the most important aspect of that?
Bottom line, Larry, there has to be a benefit to the general public when we lease that property out.
Pat Montoya heads up Albuquerque's municipal development.
Today, what is the public benefit to the lease of city property to the Museum of Military History?
Larry, in my opinion, there is no benefit to the general public only because that facility is not open to the public.
It was only after the lease was signed that city officials discovered The Military History Organization is a museum in name only.
Is there a complete inventory of all the items in the New Mexico Museum of Military History collection?
Not that I'm aware of.
How do you know what you have in your collection if you don't have an inventory?
It's a good question.
In fact, the nonprofit organization has packed the warehouse with so much military stuff, it can't keep track of it all.
Is there any organization here to the collection here in the warehouse?
The short answer is no.
Now, the museum did a good job accumulating old military relics, but a poor job managing the collection. For example, no one with the organization is sure just how many vehicles are in the collection. All the records are missing.
We had titles on everything that we had in the collection at one time, but they have all disappeared.
That's a problem, right?
Very much so, yes.
The museum generates a little income by loaning vehicles to Hollywood productions like Oppenheimer, but it's just not enough. Plagued with a dwindling membership, shoddy paperwork, disorganization, and dependency on a small yet dedicated group of volunteers like 89-year-old Doyle Caton, the museum is unable to meet its obligations.
Today, the museum is not in compliance with the City of Albuquerque's lease. The intent by this group was, they intended well. However, for a number of reasons, they just weren't able to comply.
The museum ignored requests for annual reports, vehicle titles, or insurance coverage. However, rather than enforce the rules, city officials simply looked the other way. That was 3 years ago.
The city was at fault here. This one fell through the cracks, and we did not enforce the policy or the procedures or what was identified in the lease.
In September, the museum was given another deadline to comply. It did not. In October, city inspectors cited the organization for fire code violations.
There was discussions within city government that they were completely out of compliance and that we needed to hold them accountable. Since they were not going to be able to comply, and it was pretty evident at that point in time, the decision was made giving them the 90-day notice that they had to vacate the property.
In January, the museum moved out and relocated its vast collection to private property.
This is very unusual. This is really, in my 5 years here, this is the first time that we've had to deal with an organization where we've actually evicted them.
What does the future look like for the New Mexico Museum of Military History?
There's a pretty black cloud over top of it right now.
Last week, the museum's board made it official. The nonprofit organization confirms it has decided to call it quits, disband, and transfer its entire historic military collection to another nonprofit. Larry Barker, KRQE, News 13.
A convoy of tanker trucks carrying something mysterious. Larry found out what was in the tankers and sparked a state investigation. In February, Larry found a mysterious convoy of large tanker trucks on a rural New Mexico ranch road. The trucks traveled back and forth all day, every day for weeks. Just what were they up to, and why did state officials launch a high-level investigation?
There's trouble brewing on the prairie here in Santa Fe County's sprawling rangeland north of Moriarty. Now, the issue that landed a prominent New Mexican in hot water is not apparent to the casual observer. But when state officials caught wind of what was happening here, they launched an investigation. The first clue to something amiss surfaced last summer after local residents noticed a parade of large tanker trucks on State Road 41 making round trips between a construction site and a remote spot adjacent to a cornfield.
And in a 2-hour period, there were 6 trucks that came in and pulled out. And that was going on from early in the morning until, evenings.
Sherry Weingarten lives just down the road.
I would say that you're looking at anywhere from 25 plus trucks a day that we're pulling in and out.
The convoy of trucks drove through this gate at all hours of the day, filled up their 5,000-gallon tanks at this pump station, and then headed out. They'd come back later for more. So what were they pulling out of the ground? Well, this is farm and ranch country where water is more precious than oil. So after millions of gallons of water was mysteriously pumped out of this well and then hauled away, the authorities were alerted.
There was water being pumped from an irrigation well at this location and transported 4 miles away to a construction site without a valid permit.
Basically, the water is being illegally diverted.
It is, that's correct.
As New Mexico's state engineer, Mike Hammond regulates surface and groundwater usage across the state.
New Mexico is the second most arid state in the union. We have a limited resource, particularly surface water. It's very critical for the state to do what it can to make sure that we have the water available for people currently living here and those that wish to come here in the future.
Due to a concern for the underground water supply in this part of central New Mexico, water usage is carefully regulated by the state engineer. Anyone drilling a well here must have a permit. For example, well number E5495 is an irrigation well owned by the Bill King Ranch, a sizable Santa Fe County farm and ranch operation. Now, if the King name sounds familiar, that's because Bill is the son of former three-term governor Bruce King.
My father and my grandfather started here in 1917, and we've been farming and ranching here ever since. So it's been about 106 years.
Down the road a few miles from the King Ranch is a massive pipeline construction project. In order to test the storage tanks, contractors needed water.
When it came time to test the tanks, they said they needed water to fill up the tank to test it to make sure there was not a leak. And so I had this well, 5495. I said, yep, we'll sell you the water and you can test the tank.
So how much water did they purchase from you?
They purchased 6 million gallons.
But here's the rub. Irrigation well 5495 is permitted for agricultural use only. Without a permit, the commercial sale of water from this site constitutes a violation of the state's water code.
There was water being pumped from an irrigation well at this location and transported 4 miles away to a construction site without a valid permit. They did not come in and properly permit the transfer of that water to that purpose and place of use.
Neighbors like Sherry Weingarten says unregulated use of water in the Estancia Basin impacts everybody.
I have no issues with people irrigating their crops, but I do have problems with someone using a well not for the purposes it's intended for. The well is an irrigation well. It's not meant for commercial use, and all of us are on wells out here. So as that water table drops, more and more people's wells go dry.
The fact that you were selling the water to a construction company, you weren't trying to hide it or anything, were you?
No, it's pretty hard to hide big semi trucks hauling it down the road in the middle of the day, every day. I wasn't trying to hide it at all.
Today, Bill King admits the unpermitted sale of water was an oversight.
When you sold the water to the construction company, did you realize that you didn't have a valid permit for that?
No, I didn't. They came and told me they wanted me to stop and they wanted me to apply for a permit. So I applied for the permit. Oh, I'm going to do whatever they tell me I have to do to make it right. The state engineers got authority over the water, and I'll do what they say.
Did the King Farms follow the rules as it related to water usage of this well?
This particular activity was not properly permitted. They were actually allowing a contractor to utilize that water off-site for a construction purpose.
Today, are there tanker trucks still pulling up to the well and pulling water out?
No. But I mean, there won't be any doing that there until the engineer decides what my punishment is and what I have to do in the future to make sure it's right.
The state engineer has now penalized the Bill King Ranch for 14.6 million gallons of water for unpermitted commercial water hauling. That means for 1 year, Bill King will not be allowed to irrigate some 35 acres of agricultural cropland.
We have a limited resource, and particularly in the Estancia Basin, we do know that excessive pumping would really cause hardship and significant loss to a number of people if that aquifer were to be completely drained.
You can't escape this. The name King in New Mexico means something because of your dad's legacy.
Right.
Do you think you're being picked on because you're Bruce King's son?
No, I don't think so. I think I understand that water is very valuable in this valley, and that I happen to own a lot of it, and I want to take care of it. So I don't think that at all.
Larry Barker, KRQE News 13.
How safe is your drinking water? What Larry found is surprising when we come back. Is your water safe to drink? For many New Mexicans, the answer is no. In July, Larry had an investigation that took a year to put together and found many New Mexicans are unknowingly drinking water dangerously contaminated with cancer-causing elements.
What bothers me is that New Mexicans are going with water that doesn't meet federal drinking water standards.
It's really scary that there are so many systems that are out of compliance.
We live in a country where clean, safe drinking water is a right. The water coming out of our taps shouldn't be a hazard to us.
Visit this northern New Mexico community and you will be in a danger zone. There are no warning signs, and even some folks who live in the Pewaukee Terraces mobile home park may be unaware of the peril. You see, there's something wrong with the water, and the only way to detect this invisible threat is in a laboratory. Test results show Pewaukee Terraces water contaminated with more than twice the legal limit of uranium. Uranium first showed up in the water here 4 years ago. Melanie Bench is with the Environmental Working Group.
No one should be drinking a lot of uranium in their water.
Over time, uranium in drinking water can weaken the immune system and impact kidney function. John Roderick heads up New Mexico's Water Protection Division.
Scientific evidence shows that long-term exposures to elevated levels of naturally occurring uranium are not safe, have the potential to build up in the body.
Since 2021, Pewaukee Terraces has been slapped with a dozen EPA violations. Despite the infractions, the mobile home park has not installed equipment to remove uranium from its water supply.
Is the drinking water at Pewaukee Terraces mobile home park safe today?
As defined by the Safe Drinking Water Act, no, it's not compliant.
And it's not just Pewaukee Terraces. Our investigation finds unsafe drinking water in communities across New Mexico. In fact, there are so many violations, enforcement is nearly impossible. James Kenny heads up New Mexico's Environment Department.
Given the widespread non-compliance in drinking water from drinking water facilities in New Mexico, we are not equipped from a staff perspective to hold everyone accountable all at once. That's not something we have the ability to do.
So there's really no excuse for years of non-compliance. I think it is the duty of the state environmental agencies to use whatever resources they have to make sure that people in the state have access to safe and clean drinking water. It's a really important public health issue.
For example, De Latte Mobile Manor in Mesilla Park. Over the past 7 years, residents here have been drinking water contaminated with uranium. De Latte has racked up 20 violations of EPA regs.
How are you going to get their attention?
Unfortunately, this is likely going to take an administrative compliance order with penalties to get their attention and to get everybody to understand that we have a community here. We have this this system where people are at risk.
And there's more. Since 2017, the town of Springer has violated safe drinking water regulations more than 50 times. Over a 7-year period, town residents have been exposed to excessive levels of a cancer-causing substance called trihalomethanes. Janet Baldwin is a professor of environmental engineering at Roger Williams University.
Trihalomethanes cause cancer. They cause cancer of liver, kidney, lung cancer, central nervous system problems. It is a well-known carcinogen.
Trihalomethane, which is a byproduct of the chlorination process, first turned up in Springer's drinking water 20 years ago.
Is the town of Springer's water supply, is it safe?
It is not safe with regard to meeting the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements.
Springer officials say they are trying to correct the violations. However, they say the town's remote location makes it difficult to find qualified personnel with the expertise to bring the water plant into compliance. Since 2011, residents of the Cassandra subdivision near Moriarty have been drinking water laden with high levels of radium, which can lead to blood disorders and cancer.
Of the 137 violation notices, how many did Cassandra comply with?
To my knowledge, none of them.
Can you assure consumers who rely on the Cassandra system that the water they drink is safe?
We cannot.
Cassandra was fined $12,000 for violating EPA regs. However, the fine remains uncollected and the water system is still out of compliance. It's the same story at Valencia County's El Shaddai subdivision. Despite compiling 71 EPA violations, the water system remains out of compliance. For a dozen years, water from the Camino Real Regional Utility in Sunland Park has been contaminated with arsenic.
Some of the health impacts associated with arsenic exposure include liver harms, kidney harms, lung and prostate cancers, liver and kidney cancers.
The Sunland Park utility has been slapped with more than 120 EPA violations, most of which have been ignored. There is an arsenic treatment plant, but sometime last year, someone turned it off and didn't tell anybody.
What was your reaction when you heard the Camino Real was not treating its water for arsenic?
To put it bluntly, I was offended on a personal level and on a professional level that this could take place.
The Camino Real utility was fined $200,000 for arsenic violations. The penalty has been appealed. The 6 water systems identified in our investigation have collectively accumulated 413 safe drinking water violations. Today, none of those systems are in compliance with the law.
How does the Environment Department protect consumers from long-term exposure to cancer-causing substances in their water by just simply writing letters?
It's safe to say that just writing the letters has not been effective and is not effective.
What grade would you give the Environment Department's enforcement of the Safe Drinking Water Act in New Mexico?
I would have to say, historically up to this point, sadly, unfortunately, probably a D.
Secretary Kinney says any water system that knowingly provides unsafe water to consumers constitutes a degree of criminal behavior.
Focusing in on those that are getting water that doesn't meet drinking water standards, it shouldn't happen in our society and in a state like New Mexico.
But it does.
But it absolutely does. Clearly, with years of noncompliance and us issuing notices of violation and even some penalties, not getting a change in behavior, shame on us if we just continue down that same path.
Today, do you have the resources to effectively address?
No, we don't have the resources in our drinking water program to protect all New Mexicans every day at all times. We don't.
Out of 1,100 public water systems in the state, about 40% fail to meet safe drinking water standards. Larry Barker, KRQE News 13.
If you want to know whether your water complies with the Safe Drinking Water Act, go to alwaysonkrqe.com. We have one more investigation to go. It's one Larry has been tracking for years. It has been Larry Barker's longest running investigation. For 19 years, the nightmare neighbor has blatantly defied the law and thumbed his nose at city enforcement and his neighbors. In February, Larry wrapped up this decades-old case with the nightmare neighbor. Final chapter.
It's unbelievable. It's totally unbelievable. It's shameful that somebody should be living in a house like this in any community.
He is what would be anyone's nightmare for a neighbor.
In 25 years, I've never seen a property that's worse than this one.
It was a crisp winter day as a wrecking crew began its assigned task. This home on a quiet residential street in Albuquerque's La Mesa neighborhood is being torn down. It only took a few days for bulldozers to reduce the property to a pile of rubble. But it was an event 3 decades in the making. You see, this is the final chapter of a tale that first came to our attention 19 years ago.
There's 2 cars parked in the driveway. Let's see if anybody's home. Well, the front door is got to be around here someplace. Hello? I don't think anybody's home.
In fact, no one has lived here for years. You see, 318 Mesilla Street served as the personal garbage dump for one John Gallegos, also known as the Nightmare Neighbor. For decades, Gallegos stockpiled a horde of rubble and debris at his home on Mesilla. The weeds, trash, and derelict vehicles in the front yard gave only a clue to what was inside. In 2005, teams of police, zoning inspectors, and animal control officers responded to complaints with a search warrant. What they discovered inside was, well, you had to see it to believe it. Officers found the entire building from floor to ceiling stuffed with trash. This is the living room. Every room in the house, every square foot is stuffed with discarded appliances, 55-gallon drums, garbage heaped upon garbage. In another room, officers found 3 pigs. Yes, pigs wallowing in a pile of hay and animal waste. For 30 years, John Gallegos has defied the law and thumbed his nose at neighbors, city inspectors, and the courts. Since 1994, Gallegos, along with his mother Diane, have been hauled into court innumerable times for persistent zoning, health, and safety violations. Despite 11 criminal complaints, 22 inspections, 15 violation notices, 36 citizen complaints, 16 judges, 2 injunctions, fines, and jail time, nothing could stop the mother-son duo from trashing the neighborhood. We met with Assistant City Attorney John Du Bois in 2006.
He is a zoning enforcement official's worst nightmare. He is a major offender, he is a repeat offender, and he is an offender that uses every advantage to play the system against effective zoning enforcement.
Next door to 318 Mesilla is the La Mesa Presbyterian Church.
We are called by Jesus to love our neighbor as we love ourselves and love the Lord our God. We've tried to love this neighbor. There's been no reciprocity.
Reverend Brett Mitchell is La Mesa's pastor.
The person has not been a good neighbor. He's been rather antagonistic towards the church and to the rest of the community. And we've wanted to have peace with him. We've wanted to be in a relationship that's constructive, that we can seek the good for each other. And that's not been the case.
And it's not just the house on Mesilla. In 2015, John's mother Diane lived at this residence in the Heights. Scattered throughout the sprawling property are a half-dozen derelict cars, worn-out tires, barbecue grills, neglected landscaping, and a jumbled mess of trash and debris. Diane Gallegos no longer lives here, and the property has now been cleaned up. However, the Gallegos zoning offenses don't stop at the city limits. In 2006, we checked out a parcel of Torrance County grassland near Torreon, owned by, you guessed it, Diane and John Gallegos.
But these 8 acres are unlike any you've seen outside a landfill. Welcome to John and Diane's private dump. A partial inventory includes 7 railroad cars, more than 100 autos, trucks, and vans, 19 semi-tractor trailer rigs, hundreds of 55-gallon drums, cinder blocks, tires and wires, blocks and barrels, aluminum, concrete, toilets, and even a kitchen sink or two.
We first met the nightmare neighbor 18 years ago.
I just wanted to say no comment, but I saved a ton on my car insurance. Good day, fellas.
But no, John, why do you live this way? Why do you do this to your neighbors?
It's just got to end. We're going to get to the point where we're going to have to throw the book at them.
In 2015, the flagrant misconduct caught the attention of then Mayor R.J. Berry.
It's a dang shame, you know, that these neighbors have had to put up with this for all these years. And I've made very clear to my legal department, I know we've tried for decades. We haven't gotten there for the neighbors. We haven't gotten there for the community. Let's fix this daggum thing once and for all.
But Mayor Berry's enforcement action plan would just have to wait. Through legal wrangling, John Gallegos managed to tie up the city's legal team in court over the next 8 years. It was only after New Mexico's Court of Appeals refused to hear his case that the nightmare neighbor's luck ran out. Albuquerque's city council declared 318 Mesilla a public nuisance, and in December, the city hired a wrecking crew to begin dismantling the blighted structure. The $73,000 demolition tab will be attached to the now empty dirt lot as a property lien. And so, as we pen the final chapter, it's time to close the book in this saga and say goodbye, nightmare neighbor. Larry Barker, KRQE News 13.
This was a KRQE News 13 special, The Best of Larry Barker Investigates. Larry is working on plenty of more investigations coming in 2025. Thanks for watching.